Strangers in My House. Get Out Now. By its_Maggie. No archive warnings apply. Frankie platonic Rory, Marina platonic Rory, Ariana Marcel platonic Zara Marcel. Rory, Frankie, Ariana Marcel, Marina, Vector Jacobs. No beta, we die like cart guy. Misunderstandings. Unreliable narrator. Rory-centric. When you think one of the weird guys who staying at your house is a vampire. Investigations. Food. Just food. Rory didn't know much about Frankie. Out of everyone in the new addition to her and Marina's nice and normal life, the tall bandaged man was somehow the most talkative and most private out of them all. Or, set between chapters 7 and 8, Rory doesn't know what to think about Frankie, so she decides to figure out why he's so weird.
Don't worry, I was permitted to do this. It's Maggie said I could, so I am.
The link is in the description if you want to read along while I'm reading aloud. So, let's get into it. Rory didn't know much about Frankie. Out of everyone in the new addition to her and Marina's nice and normal life, the tall bandaged man was somehow the most talkative and most private out of them all. Aside from Ariana. Talking to her was like talking to a rock. Frankie was weird. There was no doubt about it. Rory didn't notice it at first. She was too busy defending her honor against Ariana. But it wasn't hard to see that Frankie acted weirder than normal during meals. Before meals, you couldn't get Frankie to shut up, but once the food was laid out and plates were made, he seemed to shrink back into his chair, as if he was hiding from the conversations. She didn't know what he was up to, but if it could harm Marina, then she needed to know what he was hiding. So, like the inventor/master thief she was, she made a plan. Step 1. Wait until mealtime. Step 2. Carefully watch Frankie and see if he actually eats anything. If he doesn't, then Step 3. Explosions. Okay, Step 3 is still a work in progress. The point still stands. It was foolproof, Rory thought. If Frankie's secret got out, then he'd leave the island with that scrawny kid and Ariana, leaving her with Marina. Nice, safe, and away from whatever trouble caused the trio to wash up on her island in the first place. The plan was put into motion a day later at lunch. It was a rainy day, so Rory spent the day watching Frankie from her spot on the couch. Aside from staying far away from the windows, he seemed to be acting pretty normal. Well, normal for Frankie at least. It looked like he was drawing something while badly humming some song that Rory had never heard of. Occasionally, he would get up and show Vector something, stare into the fire nestled in the hearth, or continue to slowly inch away from the windows until he was basically standing in the middle of the room. Lunch was called and Frankie moved with everyone else to pick a plate and get food. Compliments were passed to Marina, Vector washed his hands, and Frankie sat down on the table without paying much attention to his food. Rory ate a piece of fish and continued watching. Conversations popped up about the day. The rain was mentioned more than once. Marina talks about the fishing she did that day. Ariana grumbled about someone stealing her stuff. Vector stumbled through a description of a book he was reading. Marina asked her why she wasn't eating. What? Rory? Are you feeling okay? Marina asked. You haven't touched your plate. Rory glanced at Marina and was about to make up some excuse that she wasn't hungry right now, or she was just eating really slowly until she turned her head back to Frankie. In the few seconds that she wasn't staring him down, all the food on his plate had somehow vanished. The plate was scraped clean without a scrap of food left. There is no way Frankie ate that quickly. There is no way anyone could eat a plate full of fish and other stuff in less than 3 seconds. She slammed her hands against the table. Motherfucker! And ignored the creeping feeling of embarrassment that only grew as the dinnertime chatter faded away and everyone stared at her. Rory! Marina gasped. What are you doing? Rory ignored her roommate's words and leaned across the table towards Frankie. His deception would not stand under the watchful eye of the world's greatest master thief. What are you doing? She hissed and resumed her former position, staring Frankie down. She had to admit Frankie reacted relatively well. He stopped shrinking back into his chair now that everyone was more aware of what he was doing and started stuttering. I'm eating... He glanced at Vector's plate. Fish! And other colorful things. That must have sounded convincing enough to him, because Frankie nodded and smiled at her increasingly unamused face. Yep, I'm eating fish on this very nice plate. Oh wow, look at this very nice plate. Isn't it such a round plate? Really? Rory challenged him, interrupting his attempt at changing the subject while leaning so far forward he was nearly lying across the table. Then what did the fish taste like? Cold. She quickly grabs some of the fish off of Vector's plate and eats it. It was cold. God damn it. What else does it taste like? What else? It's very fishy. And it's really, it looks very nice on this plate. Before Rory could fight back against Frankie's very clearly fishy description of fish, she was dragged off the table by a very frustrated Marina. Rory! What are you doing? She said. Leave Frankie alone and get off the table. He's not eating! Rory cried while waving dramatically at the bandaged man. He's already finished his food, and you haven't touched yours, stated Marina sternly, shutting down any of Rory's nonsense. So stop bothering him and eat your dinner. But he never eats! She continued to point out a very nervous Frankie, who seemed like he'd rather be standing out in the rain than a part of this conversation for any longer. But Rory needed answers. Hold on, Ariana interjected, interrupting her argument with Marina. You watch Eye Patch over here eat? That sounded worse than Rory was expecting. I don't watch him eat, she countered, and promptly failed to find any good reason why she didn't mean to be seen as creepy. She was just really interested in Frankie's eating habits. Or lack of. Once again, Ariana cut her off. How would you know what he does or doesn't eat then? He's just being weird! Rory tried to justify the plan she was quickly realizing wasn't worth fighting over. If he wasn't being weird, then I wouldn't have been watching him. So you were watching him, Ariana yelled, pushing back to defend her friend. Because, Rory made sure to emphasize her point, he's being weird. That doesn't make it better. And now, standing up from the table, Ariana yelled back, so back the fuck up and leave him alone. The brewing fight was thankfully cut short by Marina once again. She stood up from the table, took a deep breath, and said in the most forcibly calm voice Rory had ever heard, Rory? Hi, Marina. I think it's time you head upstairs for the night. Fine. So that didn't work, Rory thought, now stuck in her room with her untouched plate of fish. It wasn't that her experiment didn't work. It did. Rory never saw Frankie eat anything throughout the meal, but his food disappeared and he sure as hell didn't eat it. She started picking at her lunch. It wasn't bad. Marina was a great cook, and based on the stories about Victor, Ariana, and Frankie's travels, it didn't sound like they had eaten anything better recently. It wasn't even a complicated meal. No one had mentioned allergies when Marina asked, the fish wasn't burnt, the vegetables weren't rotten. Nothing looked spoiled or had gone bad. It was just a little garlicky. Hold on, garlicky? What if that was the problem? Marina used a lot of garlic in her cooking. And salt! Everything Marina made had salt. Now, Frankie was always covered in bandages and a big coat to hide himself from the sun. He hated the rain and the ocean because vampires can't cross running water. Rain's just water running vertically. Or not. She's not a vampire expert. But she could be. He has an eye patch because... Okay, the vampire theory might not explain that, but everything else fits. He doesn't talk about his past because it's really long and full of tragedy. He acts weird because he's used to using older customs that seem out of place among the current generation. Rory was on the right track. She knew it. Quickly pulling out one of her many notebooks, she grabbed a pencil and started jotting down notes. She knew Frankie was a vampire. Now she just needed to prove it.